I think when it comes to addiction, right, and I say this often, I think we focus too much on the worst day and we forget the first day. That we show our children, we educate them on addiction in its worst stage. And we don't talk about the first stage. I grew up in a home that suffered because of alcoholism. My father still struggles. So at a young age, I knew there was something wrong with Miller Lights by the way it was presenting within my father and my mom and dad's marriage. Um, so, so genetically, I think I was predisposed, but I also had to deal with the trauma of living under that roof with an alcoholic. Um, and back then it was a little more acceptable. It was a little more acceptable for to be a 15-year-old kid going out on Fridays and Saturday nights drinking as many beers as possible.
An author, motivational speaker, former NBA player, and wellness advocate, Chris has founded 3 organizations that provide programs and services with a goal of overcoming setbacks and navigating life's challenges, which is absolutely amazing. And first of all, congrats on 15 years of sobriety this past August. That's phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's talk a little bit to start, in case anyone doesn't know, a little bit about your background in the NBA and what that journey was like.
That journey was difficult, right? The reflection on those years, they're not always easy. I was struggling severely at that time with substance use, with dependency. So every time I ran through the tunnel or every time I put on the Celtics jersey, um, I knew that it was coming to an end. So it was really hard to enjoy it, to kind of soak it all up because I had this secret that I was living with that I knew at some point I wasn't going to be able to keep a secret any longer.
You've been very open and honest, written a book, and talked about the struggles that you had with addiction. When when did it start? How did you hide it, as you talked about a little bit earlier?
I think when it comes to addiction, right, and I say this often, I think we focus too much on the worst day and we forget the first day. That we show our children, we educate them on addiction in its worst stage. And we don't talk about the first stage. I grew up in a home that suffered because of alcoholism. My father still struggles. So at a young age, I knew there was something wrong with Miller Lights by the way it was presenting within my father and my mom and dad's marriage. Um, so, so genetically, I think I was predisposed, but I also had to deal with the trauma of living under that roof with an alcoholic. Um, and back then it was a little more acceptable. It was a little more acceptable for to be a 15-year-old kid going out on Fridays and Saturday nights drinking as many beers as possible. Um, but once I entered the world of cocaine at Boston College, I knew it. I knew it was a different world. I knew it was a secretive world. I knew that I couldn't disclose what I was struggling with at 18 years old. So from the age of 18 to 32, I lived in silence. I lived in my own prison, emotionally and mentally and physically towards the end. Um, so, people often say to me, how could you hide, an Oxycontin addiction that was that extensive? How could you hide a heroin addiction it was that extensive? You work really hard to hide it. My whole day was spent, my thoughts, my actions were to keep this a secret from the people who love me.
That is something really big and heavy. I feel like that weighs with you, especially in college when you're
Mm.
already, you're playing sports, you're trying to get through school, and then you're dealing with that too. What were some of those challenges like being a athlete, a student, and dealing with that? And how do you feel like that affected you going through college, entering into MBA?
I think both universities had two different approaches. I think Boston College was more of a punitive. approach when it came to drug use or failing drug testing. Um, Fresno State was very therapeutic. Like they wanted to introduce me to as much avenues as possible to get sober. Um, for me, I look back on both moments. I think they both did their job, but I believe in the latter. I believe in what Fresno State did for me, introducing me to whether it's IOP therapy, AA meetings, NA meetings. Um, I was introduced to all of that at a pretty young age on the campus of Fresno State.
What was it when finally went into rehab, and what was it that you said this was the time, this is it, it's the start of it, I guess, more so.
I think it was really important for me to find a level of acceptance of my failures and where my life had gone and what it has become. Once I was able to be honest enough and raw enough to really look at my world. It was easy when I was 27 years old and I could tell people that I played in the NBA, or I just got back from Europe or Asia. But at 32, it was gone, right? There was nothing left. It was just pain. It was just wreckage. And obviously my defense mechanism was to try to suppress that and keep that away from me. But there was a time in treatment where I sat back and I took a look at my life. And at that point, there was only one way to go. And that was up.
I always think with every setback in life or any challenge you face in life, oftentimes, as bad as it may be, you can find these silver linings. And I really think that you've taken your story and your struggles and your pain and turned it into something really good with your 3 organizations that you've created. And now you're speaking to million children, kids, youth, that could also be struggling with addiction, substance abuse, wellness, self-esteem issues. Tell us a little bit about Herren Talks and what your mission is with that.
We've been doing it for probably 12 years, right? I started, it was unexpected. It wasn't in the plan. There was a local teacher here who offered me a Dunkin' Donuts gift card to speak to her class. And, I've been going to classrooms and schools for the last 12 years because of her, right? It happened very organically. But in the first stage of my speaking, I would go in and I would tell my story. And then I realized pretty quickly, as powerful as my story is, it's not enough, right? And I think that, again, to touch on it, the majority of the focus was on how bad it got, not where it began. So I pivoted in like year 7 and started talking about the first day and the emotion and the self-esteem around this, the family dynamic. And I saw a huge shift in students and outreach and kids seeking help or wanting help or willing to share their story and not talk about mine. So, a couple of million kids over a decade later, it's something that I'm unbelievably proud of, and it's where I want to be, right? So I get opportunities to speak to, the Texans when J.J. Watt was there, right? Or the Patriots or the Packers. But the truth is, I want to be in front of kids. I believe that's where I can make a difference. That's where I believe I can kind of allow them to take a look at their life and who they're becoming as a teenager.
I love how you said that, because we often talk about you're going in to make an impact, but you can clearly see from how you're sharing that you're impacted as well.
Totally. I mean, I love it. I have an unbelievable vantage point, right? I see tears, right? Like that's what people don't see from my vantage point. People don't see the little girl or the little boy wiping their face or putting their head down. All the kids see kids who, in the middle of my talk, walk out upset. But I have a great vantage point that I know that kids need it. They need it. I think when it comes to our kids, I think we focus on academics and athletics. I think there's so much emphasis on a young teenager, on the athlete he's going to become or the student they are. And I think we forget about them socially. I think we need to challenge our kids socially and emotionally. And I think, when I walk into a school, that's the goal. The goal is for them to leave the school, leave the presentation, and think about their mom and dad, and think about their little brother and sister, and think about the kid they're becoming.
As you talk to these students, the first thing that comes to my mind is like a lot of like, popular students or stigmas around like who kids are and, drinking is cool. How do you break down that stereotype that it's not worth it? And it can lead you to really bad things down the road.
I can only use my experience, right? My history, and from a very young age, and I'm transparent with kids and I share this with kids. From a very young age, that being teenage years, I used to go out with my buddies after football games, after basketball games, and we'd be in this lonely little basement drinking together with all of our childhood friends. But at the end of the night, I always had a couple of friends that never drank and kids who refused to smoke marijuana. And at the end of the night, I would look at them and I would say to myself on my walk home to my mom, who's waiting up for me, how come those kids don't have that walk? How come those kids can function the way they function in that setting and they don't have to change themselves? And the truth is, at the end of the day, I was the basketball player. I was the basketball star. I was the performer in front of everyone. But the truth is, at a young age, I couldn't hang out with 4 kids I've known since I was 4 years old. And as a parent, that's really all I want from my children. That's all I want is for my kids to have an anchor and to be okay with being themselves amongst their peers. But unfortunately, we kind of blow through these years. And I see it every day at Herren Wellness. I see parents who show up with their children, adult children, and, who are now struggling, either had to get out of college or after school. And they wish they did it different. They wish they had a different approach. If they could do it over, they would do it differently. And that's the narrative. That's the conversation that I'm trying to have with these kids, that it's okay to take a look at who you are at 15. It's okay to kind of do a little self-evaluation of who you're becoming and some of the decisions you're making.
Chris, I have a 21 and 22-year-old. So, in kind of the midst of some of that. But I think what you said earlier that really struck me is the emphasis on education, the emphasis on athletics, the emphasis on you need to know at 15 what you're going to do with the rest of your life versus that social aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's where we've fallen short. I think that's, when it comes to this, I think that's where we've fallen short. And listen, my son is 25, my daughter's 22. And I have a 15-year-old, and the question is always why. Like, let's just sit down and let's understand your why. Let's understand why you have to engage in this behavior, make these decisions, make these mistakes, take this risk. I just want to know why. And if we understand why, then we can work from there. But when you look at kids all across the country who come in, on a Friday night, the first time, drunk, intoxicated, high, the first question with mom and dad in the living room is, where did you get it? Who were you with?
That's true.
What did you do? How much did you do? Parents don't ask why.
Mm-hmm. I love too that, it's not only is it your speaking program to youth, but it's also the Herren Project, which you created, and obviously it affects not just the person that's doing it, but people around them, the family, the parents. Speak a little bit to the Herren Project and how you're helping families navigate these things.
The Herren Project all stems from the Mullen family. You know, Chris Mullen and his wife, when he was playing for the Indiana Pacers, made a decision to pick up their phone and find a place for me. You know, find the center that will take me and allow me to start the process of healing. And I watched very closely what that gift has done, not only for me but for my family. And I wanted to give that same gift. I wanted to be the person on the other line saying, "Don't worry, we have a place for you." And you know, in the last 10 years, we've done it very quietly, but we've given away almost $8 million worth of scholarships to people who can't afford treatment. You know, we've now kind of covered the whole spectrum with family support and education and prevention and the navigation of treatment for families.
The
You
navigation
know,
of treatment.
yeah, that's no joke, right?
That's no joke.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, you know, because nobody preps for it, right? Like all of a sudden, you wake up one day and there's the person you love most, and you just want them to be safe and go somewhere where they can have an opportunity to rebuild. And no parents prep for that. No parents plan for it. It's not in the cards.
Yeah.
But you know, I often say there's no finish line to treatment, right? So for some people it takes, a month. Some people it takes 11. And I was just given that gift by the Mullen family to spend 11 months in a treatment setting where I was able to rebuild not only myself, but my family.
Without a doubt. I think my first job out of college was at Rogers Memorial Hospital, and helping to open up their eating disorder center. And I think that navigation, because, like you said, parents don't prepare for it from an emotional standpoint, and then dealing with insurance and dealing with everything else that comes with it. I think that navigation piece is just something so special that you have.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know I just for years, I mean, and honestly, for me personally, my wife, she was 8 months pregnant and we had two children, and her husband was just found on the side of the road with a needle in his arm, overdosed. And she's got to get Christopher and Samantha at school, and she's 8 months pregnant. Now she's got to navigate the biggest decision of our family's life.
Yeah.
And nobody preps for that, nobody prepares for it. And that's why at Herren Project we've set up internally a group of people that kind of take that baton and help the family with that process.
Wow.
What is some of the messaging, I guess, to the kids,
Mm.
for those listening, that from a parent standpoint and from the kids themselves, that they can take away from this conversation?
Well, I think oftentimes family is kind of left out of this talk, right? Like I walk into a school and it's the drug talk. So immediately, their thought process is some guy's going to tell us how bad drugs are and what drugs are going to do to our life. I think what kids need to understand is what they do to families, and how quickly a family can change, and how impressionable a younger brother is or a younger sister. I think when you kind of downshift and bring it to their level, into their world, I think they can identify. And we've done a horrible decision at painting that portrait of addiction. And if I ask kids to walk into my presentation and bring a picture of a drug addict, everybody brings the worst day. Nobody brings the 19-year-old kid who's sitting in my treatment center right now, whose parents just flew in from California to drop their child off. Nobody envisions that. And,
Right.
and and the face of addiction has changed, right? I think we've done in the last couple of decades, I think we've done a better job at changing the face, because so many people were living in secrecy, and now people are kind of willing to step out and share their struggles. So
I think sometimes the hardest thing is for youth to speak to their own friends
mm,
if they see something going wrong or that they're not, doing right or struggling with. And it could be, not just addiction. Maybe it's someone struggling with mental health. You're teammate, your student in the seat next to you in the classroom, what advice would you give to those kids who see something and they just need the courage to speak up?
I think where we've gone wrong for years is obviously the worst day, right? And then we use words in this such as rock bottom, right? Someone has to fall completely on their face before we can help them up. And it's the furthest thing from the truth. Like early intervention is what will change this. People who step in early, help others early, introduce them to pathways to recovery early. That's what changes stuff. That's what changes lives. And, when I walk into a school and I talk about a friend who's struggling, the first suggestion immediately is my goal is that they're going to walk out and tell someone, that they're going to have the confidence to go to their guidance counselor and say, not maybe it's me or maybe it's my best friend. And again, when you think about it, their lives are so heavily evaluated just on their grades and on sports or arts. So like nobody's checking in with them saying, hey, right now you're like a C+ student on Friday nights, or you're struggling on weekends. And I think if we can shift and kind of present it that way, and then I think kids will be a little more inquisitive and self-reflective, that they would take a look at themselves.
I think one of the things you said earlier, just the genetic disposition, of it. We have, a very good family friend who she is 20 years into the struggle. And, started with a cheerleading injury that spiraled because of the oxy she was given. But there wasn't that genetic factor taken into account. From, I think, the doctor's standpoint of looking at like, okay, what do we give for pain given the family's history?
Yeah, absolutely. There's not enough of that, right? There's not enough. They're not curious enough, and they don't dig deep. And again, I don't mean to offend anyone, but like, you go to medical school for 8 years, and the question they ask you is, what are you on a scale of 1 to 10 for pain? You know what I mean? Like I'm going to tell you a 10 all day long. If you're going to give me that option, I'm going to give you a 10. So you give me what I'm seeking. And I think that there needs to be a more curious approach and family history approach to people. But, the other thing is too, is I see families like this every day that, I have someone here right now who has 4 brothers and sisters who are very successful. They have families, they have children, they have careers. They've done really, really well for themselves. But their brother, who's currently here, has not. And he's the only one in the family. He's the only one in the family that struggles. So to me, that's the scariest thing about alcoholism and addiction, right? Is nobody knows who has it. And I
think there's, I was gonna say, I think there's the mindset, like if you're functioning, then it's not real.
Sure. And again, that kind of plays into the narrative of rock bottom, right? Like if you're going to work every day and you're functioning, then you're so far away from the bottom. But the truth is, I see it all the time. People get sober at 40, 50, 60, and they say like, gosh, man, I missed out on so much. And again, for me, we need to have more of a why wait approach. Like, why wait to get sober? Yeah. Sobriety recovery has enhanced every part of my life. It's made me better at every facet of my life. So why wait?
I love that. Why wait? People should think about that in so many different areas of their lives.
Totally.
I just think you're doing so much wonderful work, obviously, with your story and your journey and now what you've transitioned and transformed it into. And I think with much favor comes great responsibility, and with a great platform also, you have a kind of a responsibility to do good with it. So we love to ask all of our guests, what does athletes doing good mean to you?
Oh, what does athletes doing good mean to me? it's becoming whole, right? It's like using, like you said, it's about using your platform to heal, to help, to take care of others, to inspire, to empower. Um, you know, I have this amazing platform because I play basketball in a driveway more than most kids. That's really what it comes down to, right? I was in the driveway playing, shoveling to shoot baskets when most kids were not. And it's given me this incredible life, and it's taught me many lessons as an adult, as a father, the level of commitment that it takes to become an athlete, and I've been able to make that applicable into this world of recovery, and I'll never lose sight in recovery. You know, I think the pillar that matters most in recovery is helping others, right? And I'll continue to do that because that's what keeps me up.
Well, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate your time, your knowledge, your perspective, and continue doing great things.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.